The stars look different from this far away from Earth. Commander Jake Morrison pressed his face against the cold glass of the observation deck and tried to remember what the night sky looked like from his backyard in Texas. That felt like a lifetime ago, even though it had only been 8 months since they left home. "Jake, you need to see this." The voice belonged to Lisa Chun, his second in command and the best pilot he had ever worked with. She stood at the main console, her dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, her brown eyes wide with excitement. Jake walked over to where she stood. The bridge of the UES Pathfinder was small compared to the massive ships in the movies, but it was home now. Ben Rodriguez looked up from his engineering station, his weathered hands still working on some repair even as he listened. Katie Walsh sat at the communications desk, her red hair catching the blue light from the screens. "What have you got?" Jake asked. "We're getting a signal," Lisa said. "It's not random. Someone is trying to talk to us." Jake felt his heart speed up. After 8 months of traveling through empty space, they had finally found what they came looking for. The first sign of intelligent life beyond Earth. He tried to keep his voice steady when he spoke. "How far away?" 2 days at our current speed," Ben said from his station. "The signal is coming from a ship, not a planet." "It's big, Jake. Really." "Big?" Katie turned in her chair. "I'm running the signal through our translation program. It's going to take time, but I think I can figure out what they're saying." Jake nodded. This was the moment they had trained for. First contact with an alien species. Everything they did in the next few hours could change the future of humanity forever. "Lisa, change course." "Ben, I want all systems running perfectly when we get there." "Katie, keep working on that translation. And everyone remember what we practiced? We're explorers, not soldiers." The next 2 days passed slowly. The alien ship grew larger on their screens with each passing hour. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. The hull was smooth and dark, with strange symbols carved into its surface. It was at least 10 times the size of their small exploration. "Vessel, they're responding to our signals," Katie said. "I think they want to meet." Jake looked at his crew. Lisa was checking her flight controls for the 100th time. Ben was running diagnostics on every system they had. Katie was reviewing her translation notes. They were as ready as they would ever be. "Take us in, Lisa, nice and slow." The alien ship had a docking bay that opened as they approached. The Pathfinder fit inside with room to spare. As soon as they were secure, the bay doors closed behind. Well, Jake said, "I guess we're committed now." Through the viewing port, they could see figures moving toward their ship. The aliens were tall and thin, with gray skin and large black eyes. They moved with purpose like soldiers. "Jake," Katie said, her voice tight with worry, "I've been listening to their internal communications. I don't think they're as friendly as we hoped." Before Jake could ask what she meant, there was a loud bang on the ship's hull. The aliens were outside and they weren't knocking politely. "They're trying to force the airlock," Ben said, checking his instruments. "I can hold them off for a while, but not forever." Jake made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Open it. We came here to make contact. Let's make contact." The airlock opened with a hiss. The aliens came aboard immediately, their movements quick and efficient. They were wearing some kind of armor that made them look even more intimidating. Their leader was taller than the others, with scars on his face and cold, calculating eyes. "I am War Master Kethfer," the alien said in perfect English. "You are now prisoners of the Veltar Empire." Jake stepped forward, trying to project calm confidence. "I'm Commander Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Pathfinder. We come in peace." Kethfer made a sound that might have been laughter. "Peace. Yes, we know about human peace. We have been watching your species for many years. We have seen your wars, your violence, your inability to control your emotions. You are weak. If you've been watching us, then you know we're not looking for trouble," Jake said. "We're explorers. We came here to learn." "You came here to die," Kethfer replied. "But first, you will help us learn everything we need to know about your world. Your defenses, your technology, your weaknesses." The aliens moved with practiced efficiency. They separated the crew, taking Ben and Katie in one direction and Lisa in another. Jake tried to follow, but 2 guards blocked his path. "Your crew will be questioned," Kethver said. "They will tell us what we want to know. Humans always break under pressure. It is your nature." Jake was led to a small white room with no windows. The walls were smooth and featureless. The only furniture was a simple chair and a table. They left him alone for hours, which Jake knew was part of their strategy. Make him worry about his crew. Make him imagine what was happening to them. When Kethver finally returned, he was not alone. A smaller alien followed him, moving with the quiet grace of someone who watched and listened more than they spoke. "This is Sub-Commander Valana," Kethver said. "She has been studying your species. She finds you fascinating." Valana stepped forward. Her eyes were different from the others, more curious than cold. "You are not what I expected, Commander Morrison. Most humans would be screaming by now. Maybe you don't know humans as well." "As you think," Jake replied. Kethver slammed his fist on the table. "We know enough. We know you form emotional attachments to your pack members. We know you will do anything to protect them. We know you are driven by fear and anger and love, and all of these things make you weak." From somewhere in the ship, Jake heard a scream. It was Lisa's voice, and the sound cut through him like a knife. He started to rise from his chair, but Kethver pushed him back down. "She is strong," the War Master said, "but she will break. They all break. And when she does, you will tell us everything we want to know about Earth." Jake closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, something had changed. The fear was still there, but it was different now, colder, more focused. "You're right about one thing," Jake said quietly. "We do form attachments. We do love our people. But you're wrong about what that makes us." Valana was watching him carefully. She had spent years studying human behavior, and something in Jake's tone made her step back. "It doesn't make us weak," Jake continued. "It makes us dangerous, more dangerous than you can imagine." Kethver laughed, but the sound was forced. "Dangerous? You are 4 humans on a ship with 50 of my warriors. You have no weapons, no way to escape, no way to contact your homeworld. What could you possibly do to us?" Jake met his eyes and smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "You're about to find out?" The interrogation continued for hours. Kethver asked about Earth's defenses, about their military capabilities, about their technology. Jake answered some questions and ignored others. All the while he was watching. Learning, memorizing everything about the ship and his captors. The screams from other parts of the ship continued. His crew was being tortured, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Nothing he could do right now, but that was about to change. When they finally left him alone again, Jake sat in the darkness of his cell and began to plan. The Veltar thought they understood humans. They thought they knew what humans would do. When pushed to the edge, they were wrong, and Jake Morrison was going to show them exactly how wrong they were. Jake had been in the White Room for 3 days. At least he thought it was 3 days. The lights never changed, and there were no windows to show him if it was day or night. Not that it mattered in space anyway. The screams had stopped 2 days ago. Jake didn't know if that was good or bad. Either his crew was dead, or they had broken and told the aliens everything they wanted to know. Both possibilities made his stomach twist, but he kept his face calm whenever the guards looked at him through the small window in the door. When Kethver came back, he brought Valana with him again. The sub-commander carried a small device that looked like a tablet. She sat across from Jake and studied him with those large, dark eyes. "Your pilot is very strong," Kethver said, as he settled into the chair opposite Jake. "Lisa Chun, she held out longer than most humans would. But she told us about your ship's weapon systems eventually." Jake felt anger rise in his chest, but he pushed it down. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," Kethver replied. "Your world's defenses, your military strength. How many ships you have, how many soldiers." Jake leaned back in his chair. "Earth has been at peace for 20 years. We don't have much of a military anymore. Most of our ships are for exploration, like the Pathfinder. It was partly true. Earth had fewer warships than it used to, but Jake didn't mention the defense stations or the new weapon systems that had been developed in secret. He gave them information that wouldn't help them much, but sounded believable. Valana made notes on her device. Tell us about your government. How are decisions made? Who leads your people? Jake answered their questions for hours. He told them about the United Earth Council, about the different nations and how they work together. He made it sound boring and complicated, which it often was. He didn't mention the emergency protocols or the hidden military commands that could turn Earth's peaceful ships into weapons of war. Between questioning sessions, Jake was left alone with his thoughts. The room was completely quiet except for the soft hum of the ship's engines. He used the time to think about what he had learned. The Veltar were an old species. They had been conquering other worlds for thousands of years. They were good at it because they understood psychology. They found what their enemies loved most, then threatened to destroy it. Fear was their greatest weapon, but they had one weakness. They were logical. Everything they did made sense from their point of view. They followed patterns and rules. They couldn't understand behavior that didn't fit their expectations. Jake began to smile in the darkness of his cell. The Veltar thought. They understood humans because they had watched Earth's television and internet. They had seen humanity's wars and violence. But they had missed something important. They had missed what humans were like when they had nothing left to lose. On the fourth day, a young Veltar guard brought Jake his food. The alien was smaller than the others, with fewer scars and a nervous way of moving. He set the tray down and turned to leave. Wait, Jake said quietly. What's your name? The guard stopped and looked back. I should not speak with you. I'm not asking for secrets, Jake said. I'm just curious. We don't have many chances to talk to your people. The guard hesitated, then said, I am Zekman. Nice to meet you, Zekman. I'm Jake. The young alien looked confused. You are not afraid? Of you? No, you seem like a good person. Sorry, good Veltar. Zekman tilted his head. You are strange. Most prisoners hate us. Why would I hate you? You're just doing your job. Over the next few days, Jake talked to Zekman whenever the guard brought his food. The conversations were short, but Jake learned useful things. He learned that the ship had 4 levels. He learned that the armory was on the 2nd level, near the engineering section. He learned that the ship's computer systems were all connected, and that the communications array was on the top level. Most importantly, he learned that Zekman had never seen humans before. The young guard was curious about Earth and human culture. Jake told him stories about Earth cities and forests, about music and art, about the ocean and the mountains. He made Earth sound beautiful and peaceful. Why did you come to space if your world is so wonderful? Zekman asked one day. Because we're curious, Jake said. We want to know what else is out there. We want to make friends with other species. Zekman was quiet for a long moment. Warmaster Kethver says humans are violent and dangerous. Some humans are, Jake admitted. But most of us just want to live in peace and learn new things. Jake could see that Zekman was thinking about this. The young alien had been taught that humans were monsters, but Jake didn't seem like a monster. He seemed kind and sad and tired. On the 7th day, Valana came to see Jake alone. She sat across from him and studied her tablet for a long time before speaking. You are not what our research predicted, she said finally. What did you expect? Anger, fear, desperate attempts to bargain for your crew's lives. Instead, you answer our questions calmly and ask about our culture. You treat our guards with respect. You even made friends with Zekman, Jake shrugged. Getting angry won't help my crew. Being afraid won't get us home. I'm trying to make the best of a bad situation. Valana leaned forward. But you are afraid. I can see it in your eyes. You are terrified of what we might do to your people. Yes, Jake said simply. I am afraid. Then why do you seem so calm? Jake met her eyes. Because fear isn't always a weakness. Sometimes it's fuel, Valana made a note on her tablet. I have been studying human behavior for many years. I know about your wars, your violence, your capacity for cruelty. But I also know about your art, your music, your literature. You are a contradiction. You can be both gentle and savage, sometimes at the same time. Most intelligent species are contradictions, Jake said. What about the Veltar? Are you all soldiers and conquerors? We are a logical people. We do what is necessary for survival and expansion. Emotion is inefficient. That sounds lonely. Valana was quiet for a moment, perhaps, but it keeps us alive. Jake nodded. Different strategies for different species. But you should know something about humans. We don't like being caged. We don't like our friends being hurt. And we really don't like being threatened. Is that a threat? It's a fact, like saying water is wet or fire is hot. It's just how we're made. Valana stood to leave, then paused at the door. The War Master plans to make an example of your pilot. Tomorrow, he wants to show you what happens when humans refuse to cooperate fully. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. Lisa has been cooperating. Not enough. She gave us technical information about your ship, but she refuses to provide the access codes to your communication system. We want to send a message to Earth using your own equipment. Jake's hands clenched into fists under the table. She doesn't know those codes. Only I do. Then you will give them to us tomorrow, or we will kill her slowly while you watch. After Valana left, Jake sat in the darkness and let himself feel the full weight of his fear and anger. Lisa was his friend, his second in command, his responsibility. She had followed him into space because she trusted him to keep the crew safe. Now she was going to die because of his decisions, but as the hours passed, Jake's fear began to change into something else. Something colder and more dangerous. The Veltar thought they understood humans because they had studied their weaknesses. They thought they knew how to break human spirits. They were about to learn that humans were most dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. Jake began to plan. The next morning, 2 guards came to get Jake. They walked him through corridors he had never seen before, past rooms full of strange equipment and alien technology. Jake memorized every turn, every door, every detail that might be useful later. They brought him to a larger room with chairs arranged in a circle. In the center was a metal table with straps and wires attached to it. Lisa was already there, held between 2 guards. Her face was bruised and her clothes were torn, but her eyes were still fierce. Jake, she said when she saw him, don't give them anything. Earth needs to know what's coming. Kethver entered the room with Valana behind him. The War Master looked pleased with himself, like a cat about to catch a mouse. Commander Morrison, Kethver said, your pilot is very stubborn, but I think watching her die will change your mind about cooperating. Jake looked at Lisa, then at Kethver. What do you want? The communication codes for your ship. We want to send a message to Earth. We want to tell them that their precious explorers are dead, and that the Veltar Empire is coming. And if I give you the codes, then your pilot lives. For now, Jake was quiet for a long moment. He could see Lisa watching him, and he knew she was trying to tell him something with her eyes. Don't do it, they seem to say. Don't give them what they want. I'll need to see the communication system, Jake said finally. The codes are complex. I can't just tell them to you. Kethver smiled. Of course, we will take you to your ship. They walked back through the corridors, but this time Jake paid attention to different things. He noticed the guard rotations, the locations of security cameras, the emergency systems built into the walls. He noticed that some areas of the ship were less heavily guarded than others. When they reached the Pathfinder, Jake felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. The ship looked so small compared to the Veltar vessel, but it was home. It was where he and his crew had lived and worked for 8 months. Inside the ship, everything was exactly as they had left it. The Veltar had searched through their belongings, but they hadn't damaged anything. Jake sat down at the communication station and began typing. The codes are in the ship's computer, he said. I need a few minutes to access them. Kethver nodded to his guards. They stood behind Jake, watching his every move, but they didn't understand human technology well enough to know what he was really doing. Jake's fingers moved across the keyboard quickly. To the watching aliens, it looked like he was accessing communication codes. In reality, he was doing something much more dangerous. He was uploading a virus into the ship's computer system. The virus was something Ben had created during their long journey to this part of space. It was designed to hide in the ship's systems and activate later, causing random malfunctions and failures. Ben had made it as a joke, but Jake had kept it in the ship's memory just in case. "There," Jake said, stepping back from the console. "The codes are ready, but I need to warn you about something." "What?" Kethver asked. "Our communication system is designed to prevent unauthorized use. If you try to send a message to Earth without following the proper sequence, it will shut down. Completely." Jake began to explain a complex series of steps that the Veltar would need to follow to send their message. Most of it was nonsense, but it sounded technical and important. While he talked, he watched the guards and memorized their positions. "This is taking too long," Kethver said finally. "Just send the message yourself." Jake nodded and turned back to the console. He began typing again, but this time he wasn't creating a message to Earth, he was activating the virus he had uploaded into the ship's systems. The virus would spread slowly through the Veltar ship's computer network. It would cause small failures. At first, things that might seem like normal maintenance issues. But over time, it would grow stronger and cause bigger problems. "The message is sent," Jake said, stepping back from the console. Kethver checked his own communication device. "I show no record of transmission. It takes time to reach Earth from here," Jake said. "The signal has to travel through several relay stations." This was true, but Jake hadn't actually sent any message. He had used the communication system to inject his virus into the Veltar ship's network. It was a small victory, but it was a start. They took him back to his cell, but Jake noticed that the guards seemed nervous. Something was bothering them, though they probably didn't know what it was yet. An hour later, the lights in his cell flickered. They came back on immediately, but Jake smiled in the darkness. The virus was working. Over the next few hours, Jake heard sounds from other parts of the ship. Doors opening and closing randomly, alarms going off briefly, then stopping. The hum of the engines changing pitch for a few seconds before returning to normal. When Zekman brought his food that evening, the young guard looked worried. "Is everything all right?" Jake asked. "There have been some equipment failures," Zekman said. "The engineers say it is normal, but it has never happened before." "Maybe the ship is getting old," Jake suggested. "Even the best technology breaks down eventually." Zekman nodded, but he still looked concerned. "May I ask you something?" "Of course." "On your world, when things go wrong, what do?" Jake thought about the question. "We try to fix them. We work together to solve problems. We don't give up, even when the problem seems impossible." "Especially then," Jake said. "Humans are good at finding solutions when everything seems hopeless." Zekman left, but Jake could see that the young alien was thinking about what he had said. That night, Jake lay in his cell and listened to the sounds of the ship. The random failures were becoming more frequent. He could hear footsteps in the corridors as repair crews rushed from one problem to another, but Jake wasn't satisfied with just causing mechanical failures. He had learned enough about Veltar psychology to know that they feared chaos and unpredictability. They liked things to be logical and orderly. He was going to give them the opposite. The next morning, when the guards came to get him for another questioning session, Jake was ready. As they walked through the corridors, he began to speak in a language the Veltar didn't recognize. It was actually just nonsense words, but he said them with the rhythm and tone of a prayer or chant. "What is he saying?" one guard asked the other. "I do not know," the second guard replied. "Should we stop him?" They decided to let him continue, but Jake could see that the strange words made them uncomfortable. He was planting seeds of doubt and fear in their minds. In the questioning room, Kethver was waiting with Valana and several other officers. They all looked tired and frustrated. "Your ship's message never reached Earth," Kethver said. "Our sensors show no transmission," Jake shrugged. "Maybe the relay stations are down." "It happens sometimes." "Or maybe you lied to us," Valana said. Quietly, Jake met her eyes. "Maybe I did." Kethver slammed his fist on the table. You will tell us the truth, or your pilot dies now. The truth? Jake said, and his voice was different now, colder, more dangerous. The truth is that you made a mistake when you captured us. What mistake? Valana asked. You assumed we were helpless. You assumed we would break under pressure. You assumed you understood what humans are capable of. Jake stood up slowly. The guards tensed, but he made no threatening moves. You've been studying us for years, he continued. You've seen our wars, our violence, our capacity for destruction. But you missed something important. You missed what we're like when we have nothing left to lose. The room was completely quiet. Even the ship's engines seemed to have stopped humming. You should be scared, Valana said quietly. Jake smiled. And it was not a pleasant smile. I am not of you. Of what I'll do next. You'll be running. At that moment, all the lights in the room went out. The emergency lights came on a few seconds later, casting everything in red shadows. The guards were shouting orders at each other in their own language. Kethfer was yelling at his officers to find out what had happened to the power systems. In the confusion, Jake did something none of them expected. He didn't try to run or fight. Instead, he sat back down in his chair and waited calmly for them to notice him again. You, Kethfer pointed at Jake. What did you do? Nothing, Jake said truthfully. I've been sitting here talking to you. Valana was studying her tablet, trying to get information from the ship's computer. All systems are reporting normal function, she said. But we clearly have power failures. Maybe your ship is older than you thought. Jake suggested helpfully. An officer rushed into the room and whispered something to Kethfer. The War Master's face grew darker with each word. Take him back to his cell, Kethfer ordered. And double the guards. As they walked through the corridors, Jake saw that his virus was working better than he had hoped. Doors were opening and closing randomly, lights flickered on and off. The temperature controls seemed to be malfunctioning, making some areas too hot and others too cold. But the real chaos was in the minds of the Veltar crew. They were a species that valued order and logic. Random equipment failures made them nervous and angry. They started arguing with each other about what was causing the problems. Back in his cell, Jake lay on his narrow bed and listened to the sounds of panic spreading through the ship. Guards ran back and forth in the corridors. Officers shouted orders. Repair crews worked frantically to fix problems that kept appearing faster than they could solve them. 3 hours later, Zekman brought Jake his food. The young guard looked exhausted and frightened. The whole ship is falling apart, Zekman said quietly. The engineers say they have never seen anything like this. What kind of problems? Jake asked. Everything. The gravity generators keep changing settings. The air recycling system is producing strange smells. The food replicators are making things that taste terrible. And the computer keeps playing music from your world at random times. Jake tried not to smile. The virus was doing exactly what Ben had designed it to do. It was creating chaos without actually damaging anything important. The ship was still functional, but the crew was going crazy. I'm sorry you're having problems, Jake said. Is there anything I can do to help? Zekman looked surprised. You would help us, even though we captured you? Equipment failures happen to everyone, Jake said. I've seen similar problems on human ships. Sometimes the solution is simpler than you think. What do you mean? Jake leaned closer to the cell door. Sometimes when a computer system gets confused, you have to reset the whole network, turn everything off and start again fresh. Zekman nodded thoughtfully. I will tell the engineers. After the guard left, Jake smiled in the darkness. He had just given the Veltar the one piece of advice that would make their problems worse. If they reset their computer network, the virus would spread even faster when the systems came back online. The next morning brought worse chaos. Jake could hear explosions echoing through the ship. Not dangerous ones, but the sound of equipment overloading and shutting down. The emergency lights were on constantly now, and the ship's artificial gravity kept fluctuating. When the guards came to get him, they looked like they hadn't slept in days. They stumbled as they walked, trying to adjust to the changing gravity. They brought him to a different room this time. It was smaller and had no windows. Kethver was there with only 2 officers. Valana was not with them. Sit. Kethver ordered. Jake sat in the metal chair and looked around the room. The walls were covered with screens showing different parts of the ship. Every screen showed some kind of problem. Sparking control panels, confused crew members, equipment that was working backwards. "This is your doing," Kethver said. "It wasn't." "A question I don't understand," Jake replied. "I've been locked in a cell. How could I cause problems all over your ship? You did something when you were on your vessel, some kind of sabotage?" Jake shrugged. "Your people watched me the whole time. I just tried to send the message you wanted." One of the officers whispered something to Kethver. The War Master's face grew even more angry. "Where is Sub-Commander Valana?" Jake asked. "She has been relieved of duty," Kethver said. "She was asking too many questions about our treatment of prisoners." Jake felt a cold anger settle in his stomach. Valana had been the most reasonable of his captors. If Kethver had removed her from command, it meant the War Master was becoming desperate and dangerous. "I want to see my crew," Jake said. "You are in no position to make demands." "I'm not making demands, I'm offering a trade." Kethver leaned forward. "What kind of trade?" "Show me that my crew is alive and unharmed, and I'll tell you how to fix your ship." The War Master studied Jake's face for a long moment. "You are lying. You do not know how to fix our problems." "Try me," Jake said quietly. 20 minutes later, they brought Jake to another part of the ship. This area was different from the rest. The corridors were darker and the air smelled like fear and pain. Jake's stomach twisted as he realized where they were taking him. They stopped outside a heavy door with a small window. Through the glass, Jake could see Ben strapped to a metal table. The engineer looked thin and weak, but he was alive. His eyes met Jake's through the window, and Ben tried to smile. "He has been very helpful," Kethver said. "He told us many interesting things about human technology." They moved to another door. Katie was in a cell similar to Jake's, but smaller. She was sitting in the corner, her red hair dirty and tangled. When she saw Jake, she pressed her hand against the glass. The third door showed Lisa. She was unconscious, connected to machines that Jake didn't recognize. Her breathing was shallow, and she looked pale. "What did you do to her?" Jake asked. "Medical experiments," Kethver said casually. "We wanted to learn about human physiology. She will live, but not for much longer." Jake stared at his friend through the glass. Lisa had followed him into space because she trusted him. She had believed in their mission of peaceful exploration. Now she was dying because of his decisions. "You want to know how to fix your ship?" Jake asked, his voice very quiet. "Yes," Jake turned to face Kethver. The War Master saw something in Jake's eyes that made him step back. "The problem isn't with your ship," Jake said. "The problem is with your crew. They're afraid. Fear makes people make mistakes. Mistakes cause more problems cause more fear. It's a cycle that feeds on itself. And how do we break this cycle?" "You don't," Jake said, "because I'm not going to let you." Before anyone could react, Jake threw himself at the nearest guard. The alien was bigger and stronger, but Jake had surprise on his side. He knocked the guard down and grabbed his weapon. The other guards raised their weapons, but Jake was already moving. He shot out the controls for the cell doors. Alarms began blaring throughout the ship. "Ben, Katie," Jake shouted. "We're leaving!" The cell doors opened with a grinding sound. Ben stumbled out first, weak but determined. Katie ran to Jake's side, her eyes fierce with anger and hope. "Where's Lisa?" she asked. "Medical bay," Jake said. "We get her first, then we get off this ship." Kethver was shouting orders at his remaining guards, but the ship's communication system was malfunctioning. His words were being mixed with random human music and weather reports from Earth. Jake looked at the War Master one last time. "You wanted to know what humans do when they have nothing left to lose," he said. "Now you're going to find out." The lights went out again, and this time they didn't come back on. The emergency lighting cast red shadows on the walls as Jake led Ben and Katie through the dark corridors. The ship's gravity was fluctuating wildly now, making each step uncertain. Behind them, they could hear Kethver shouting orders that no, One could follow because the communication system kept playing random Earth broadcasts. This way, Jake whispered, remembering the path from his earlier trips through the ship. The medical bay is 2 levels up. They moved carefully through the chaos. Veltar crew members ran past them in the darkness, too focused on their own. Emergencies to notice 3 humans moving through their ship. The virus had created so many problems that the aliens couldn't keep track of everything that was going wrong. At a junction between corridors, they stopped to catch their breath. Ben was leaning against the wall, still weak from days of torture. "Jake," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something. When they were questioning me, I gave them information about our ship's systems. I'm sorry." "What kind of information?" Jake asked. "Navigation, life support, basic engineering?" "Nothing about weapons or defenses, but they know how our technology works now." Jake put his hand on Ben's shoulder. "You did what you had to do to survive. That's what matters." Katie was checking the alien weapon Jake had taken from the guard. "How many shots does this thing have?" she asked. "I don't know," Jake admitted, "but we're not going to fight our way out. We're going to be smarter than that." They continued toward the medical bay, but their path was blocked by a group of Veltar engineers working on a damaged control panel. Jake watched them for a moment, then smiled. "Follow my lead," he whispered to his crew. Jake walked up to the engineers and began speaking in the Veltar language he had learned from Zekman. His pronunciation was terrible, but in the chaos the aliens didn't notice. "Emergency repair needed on level 3, he said, pointing down the corridor. "Computer core malfunction." The engineers looked at each other, then hurried away in the direction Jake had pointed. The path to the medical bay was now clear. "How did you know their language?" Katie asked as they climbed the stairs. "I made friends with one of the guards," Jake said. "Never waste an opportunity to learn something useful." The medical bay was guarded by 2 Veltar soldiers, but they were distracted by sparks shooting from a damaged console. Jake and his team waited in the shadows until the guards left to get repair equipment inside the medical bay. They found Lisa connected to several alien machines. Her breathing was weak, but she was alive. Ben quickly studied the equipment while Katie kept watch at the door. "I can disconnect her safely," Ben said, "but she's in bad shape. Whatever they did to her, it damaged her nervous system." "Can she walk?" Jake asked. "I don't think so." Jake made a decision. "Ben, you and Katie get her to the docking bay. I'll meet you there." "Where are you going?" Katie asked. "To finish what I started." Jake left his crew and made his way toward the ship's command center. The corridors were even more chaotic now. The artificial gravity had failed completely in some sections, and Veltar crew members floated helplessly in midair. The ship's computer was playing a mixture of human music, alien announcements, and what sounded like cooking shows from Earth. At the command center, Jake found exactly what he had hoped to see. The room was in chaos. Officers shouted at each other while technicians tried desperately to regain control of their systems. At the center of it all stood Kethver, his face twisted with rage and frustration. "War Master," Jake called out as he entered the room. Every alien in the room turned to stare at him. Several reached for their weapons, but Kethver held up his hand to stop them. "Commander Morrison," the War Master said. "Come to surrender?" "No," Jake replied calmly. "I came to give you a choice." Jake walked to the center of the room, ignoring the weapons pointed at him. On the main screen, he could see displays showing the chaos throughout the ship. Systems failing, crew members panicking, equipment malfunctioning in ways that made no logical sense. "This is what humans do," Jake said, gesturing at the screens. "When you threaten our families, when you hurt our friends, when you try to make us into slaves, we become something you can't predict or control." "You destroyed our ship with some kind of virus," Kethver accused. "No," Jake said. "I gave your ship a case of humanity, unpredictability, chaos, the things you fear most." An officer ran up to Kethver and whispered urgently in his ear. The War Master's face grew even darker. "It seems your crew has escaped," Kethver said. "My guards found them at the docking bay." Jake felt his heart sink, but he kept his expression calm. Then I guess we're both stuck here. Not exactly. Kethver smiled coldly. I still have you. And I can still send my fleet to destroy your world. What fleet? Jake asked. Kethver looked confused. The invasion fleet. They are already on their way to your solar system. Jake pulled out a small device from his pocket. It looked like a piece of broken equipment from the Pathfinder, but it was actually something much more important. You mean the fleet that's been receiving detailed reports about everything that happened on this ship? Jake said. The fleet that's been watching recordings of how humans react when you torture them. The fleet that now knows humans can take control of Veltar technology? Kethver stared at the device in Jake's hand. What is that, a transmitter? I've been broadcasting everything that happened here to your fleet. Every conversation, every act of torture, every system failure. They've seen how 4 humans brought your entire ship to its knees. Jake activated the device. Immediately, voices began coming from the ship's communication system. Veltar voices speaking their own language. But Jake had learned enough to understand some of what they were saying. The fleet commanders were arguing. Some wanted to continue with the invasion. Others wanted to retreat. A few were suggesting that they should try to negotiate with Earth instead of attacking it. Your fleet is breaking apart, Jake said, because they're smart enough to realize that invading Earth would be a disaster. They've seen what humans can do when we're angry. Kethver raised his weapon and pointed it at Jake. Then I will kill you here and now. Go ahead, Jake said calmly. But that won't stop what's already started. Your own people are questioning your leadership. Your ship is falling apart. And my crew is probably already on their way back to Earth with everything they learned about your technology. The War Master's hand shook with rage. You are just one human. You cannot defeat the entire Veltar Empire. I don't need to defeat your empire, Jake said. I just need to make them afraid of what humans might do if they attack us. And I've already done that. Before Kethver could pull the trigger, Valana entered the command center. She looked tired and sad, but determined. War Master, she said. I am relieving you of command under emergency protocols. The fleet commanders have voted. The invasion is cancelled. Kethver spun around to face her. You have no authority here. The High Command disagrees, Valana said. She held up her own communication device. They want to avoid a war with humanity. They believe the cost would be too high. Jake watched as Kethver's world fell apart around him. The proud War Master who had captured 4 humans now faced the collapse of everything he had worked for. You were right, Valana said to Jake. We underestimated your species. We thought emotional attachment made you weak. Instead, it made you more dangerous than we could imagine. So what happens now? Jake asked. Now you go home, Valana said, and we go ours. And hopefully our species can find a better way to coexist in the future. Jake nodded. I'd like that. As he left the command center, Jake could hear Kethver screaming at his officers, trying to regain control of a situation that had already slipped away from him. The proud War Master was learning what humans had always known. Sometimes the greatest victory comes not from fighting, but from making your enemy too afraid to fight at all. At the docking bay, Jake found his crew loading Lisa into the Pathfinder. She was conscious now, though still weak. Jake, she whispered as he knelt beside her, did we win? Jake looked around at his battered crew, then back at the chaos of the Veltar ship. Yeah, he said, we won. As the Pathfinder pulled away from the alien vessel, Jake sent one final message to the Veltar fleet. It was simple and direct. You were right to be scared. And if you ever threaten Earth again, you'll be running for the rest of your lives? The journey home would take 8 months, but Earth would be ready for whatever came next. Because now the galaxy knew what humans were. Truly capable of when they had nothing left to lose.